All right, so today I'm excited because this is the first time I've done it with two guests. All right, so on the Marriage Sprint podcast, I'm really delighted to be joined by an Australian couple, Bree Masters and Matt Rizzo. So, how are you guys doing? Thanks for coming on today. I'll
Yeah, I'm
start
really
with
good,
Bree.
thank you.
Oh no, let's
Yeah.
start with Matt. Let's start with
Oh,
Matt.
well, there you go. I just jumped the line anyway. But yeah, no, I'm going really well. But yeah, appreciate you having us on.
All right,
Yeah,
excellent. How are you
likewise.
doing, Bree?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, my pleasure. Obviously, there's going to be a few not logistical issues, but in terms of like managing the freeway conversation, I had to do that before, so I apologize to anyone listening if it's kind of a little bit clunky. But there's going to be some great info today, so yeah, I'm excited to go on with it. Um, so I think I have heard this story on the podcast before, but I'm interested to know how did you guys meet? Whoever wants to
Yeah,
kick off, that's fine.
yeah. Matt will get me to tell this story. But so it was 2019 stall gift. That was my first stall gift that I did. And that's when I met Matt. I knew a little bit about him before that, being that he'd won a stall gift before. He was getting coached by one of my coach's friends. So we were kind of in that same circle. But then we finally met at the stall gift in 2019, and that's where it all kicked off.
Okay, all right. And that's a beautiful segue into because I wanted to start talking to Matt about pro running, which is
Yeah.
obviously very popular in Australia. So as a kid, I lived in Perth. So I
Yeah.
remember kind of the stall gift. I remember like we had some British athletes. I think Christian Malcolm ran it. Obviously, Safa Powell's ran it. So
Yeah.
it's a big deal, right? And in 2017, you won that. Can you kind of give like the listeners a little bit, sort of elaborate a little bit upon exactly what pro running is
Yep.
and how big a deal it was to win the story.
Yeah, for sure. So pro running's been around for a very long time, especially the stall gift's been around for like 141 years. Um, so it's kind of a unique little thing that most of the carnivals are run on grass, especially stall. And it's mainly run over 120 meters. So a lot of people go like, oh, 120 meters on grass, why do you do that? And it's just what pro running's always been like. Back in the day, especially for stall, they used to run for a pig, and now everyone runs for $40,000 to the winner. And a lot of people look at it and go, oh, how do you determine this? And it's each athlete gets a handicap depending on their like personal best times or what they've been running throughout the season. It's aiming at to try and get them all to finish at the exact same time over the line. It's more one in a dip rather than have someone that blows your doors off and wins by 8 to 10 meters.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, all right. And so, I mean, obviously, like you just mentioned, sort of like the financial incentive to win still, but
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
in terms of like the kudos that you get for that, kind of how big a deal is it in Australia? It takes place
Well,
on Easter weekend, right?
yeah, it's on Easter weekend. Starts off at Easter Saturday, and so you run the heats on Easter Saturday, and then the semis and finals are on Easter Monday. So it's a little bit different. The track you have that day in between on Sunday, just to
Right.
rest, relax, and a few other events happen there as well, like a 70 and a 200 on grass. But yeah, it's real funny. Like I think I started racing there when I was maybe 13 or something like that. I won the little A's 400 meters. And for
Okay.
me, running a four, that was the last time I ran a four because I was just like, yeah, no, thank you. And it's just one of those things that's real intriguing for me. Like the coach that I have now, Bruce Gulliver, has been really involved back in the day with professional foot running, especially in New South Wales. And I met him when I was down in Victoria when I came back to athletics. And he kind of introduced me to it. And it was one of those things that I wasn't the best in the country at the time,
Right.
but pro running allowed me just to develop as an athlete and just come out and enjoy it every week, try and get myself better. And each year just keep getting my handicap pulled back and trying to improve on top of that. And Stall came on my radar after that 2013 little A's. And I was like, oh, it'd be nice to win this gift one day. And it was just one of those things that I never really set myself for it, but I just kept getting better and better. And in 2016, I was lucky enough to make the final for the first time and finish fifth there. And I think after making that final, it made me a little bit more hungry. Like, you know what? Maybe I could have won it this year, like next year. So put everything into place and had one of those seasons that was just absolutely perfect. Came back in 2017 and was lucky enough to take the chocolates that year, funny enough. And then just kept going on from there and went on to 2018, came back as a defending champ and was lucky enough to make the final, fell a bit short, but it happens sometimes. Like, after you reach the mountain, you kind of fall off a little bit and you want to get
Right.
back up. Had a few years that I missed there. I think it was 2019, 2020 was cancelled, and then came back this year, 2023, and was lucky enough to make the final and run off red, which is a huge honour for myself.
Okay, all right, fantastic. And I mean, I guess it's one of those things where it's quite difficult to win stall back to back or win it multiple times, right? Because
definitely it is.
With the handicaps and everything and the way that works, then okay,
yeah, for sure. And there's only been a couple, like you got Bill Howard that won in like 66 and 67, 1966, 1967. You got Josh Ross that won in 2003, 2005, and you got Barry Foley that's won it twice as well. So pretty much a really, really small group of people have been able to win it, not even back to back or 2 times.
Yeah. Okay. And was the training that much different for this than it is for like your typical sort of amateur sprint?
Nah, not at all. Like it's pretty much the same. Like what I did, it was real funny in 2017. Like someone like me, I don't have the highest top end in the world. And I said to my coach in 2017 at the time, I said, "Oh, how am I going to win this thing? Like it's 120 meters. Like I'm going to die." And he's like, "Oh, we'll just get your first 70 meters as fast as possible." And that's really much what I've worked on my whole athletics career. It's the same. It was the same training. Like the crew that I was training with, some were running on the track and some were doing pros, and we all pretty much did the exact same session, and it hasn't really changed from there.
Yeah. Okay. I guess like if you're fast to an extent.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Cool. So Bree, I want to kick it over to you now. So what's the technical name for the sport? I was going to call it beach sprinting. Was it surf life saving, or like what do I call it?
Yeah, it's surf life saving.
Right, so surf life saving. Okay.
Yeah, so beach sprinting is just an aspect of it. There's yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. So, and again, this is another sport that's perhaps more popular in Australia than it is in a lot of other countries. Though I did listen to one podcast, and I believe you said that they had the World Championships. I think it was in the Netherlands at one point. Was that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one that I won.
Right. Okay. Okay. Sorry. I probably should have remembered that important piece of information as well. But again, are you able to sort of like outline a little bit about that sport for us and kind of talk us through your obviously like winning the World Championships in that and your success there as well?
Yeah, so I guess surf life saving to start off with. Usually in Australia, we get put into it when we're quite young. It's known as nippers. And it's a sport that gets you familiar with the ocean. You learn, your ocean skills, which I think is super, super important, especially if you're living on the Gold Coast. We've got a massive strip of ocean and beach. And yeah, I think it's really important to be comfortable in the ocean. So that's the reason why I got into it. And my parents put me into so many sports when I was younger, and surf life saving was just one of them. And I think I was 6 years old when I started it. And you do events, you do events such as like board, swim, wade is one of the ones where you just kind of like, you run around 2 people in the ocean and just kind of run through the whitewash. The beach flags and beach sprint and beach relay. And as you get older, you start to see like Ironman, ski, and like a bit of harder events introduced. But I sort of gravitated towards the beach sprinting and beach flag side of things. I wasn't really a lover of the ocean. Like I love going out there and swimming and whatnot, but like the swim, the board, that was just not my forte. I remember just like freezing in the ocean, just dreading it. Like, I don't want to do this event. So yeah, as I got older, I gravitated towards the beach side of things, and it is hard to do it all. Some of them, around like 14 to 15, some people do water and beach, but usually you pick one or the other.
Right.
And a lot of the events end up clashing at some of the bigger competitions. So yeah, it is hard to do everything. And then as I got older, I did little athletics when I was a kid too. I think that's important to mention. I did OzTag, netball, dancing. Dancing was a big thing for me. Dancing was like probably my main focus. I love dancing. I went to a performing arts high school and just saw my future in dancing, and, surf life saving and running and whatnot was just kind of on the side. But as I got older, I think I was 13 when I won my first Australian beach sprint title, and I actually raced up in the 15s age group. So I think I'm still one of the youngest to win an Australian beach sprint title in that age group. So that was pretty exciting for me. And that was probably the moment where I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, what else could I achieve here? And that's probably when I started to take it a little bit more seriously, moving into the senior ranks, which is 15 and up. But yeah,
everybody that's 15 and up, they all race together. So there's no kind of...
No. So nippers is usually like 6.
Right. Okay.
I've got little tiny tots before that. Until 14, I think it is still. When I was in nippers, it was 14. And then when you go into the senior ranks, it was 15s, 17s, 19s, and opens. So there's age groups that you're in for 2 years, but that's when you kind of go into the senior ranks, and it's not really called nippers anymore.
Yeah, okay.
You start competing. Yeah, you start competing professionally. Like you can't go to a world championships if you're a nipper. It's not a
right.
thing.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So
and so I mean, well, talk us through the world championships. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to go to a few world championships. My first one was in Adelaide, I believe. Very exciting. Just stayed in Australia. And I think I came home with 6 gold medals at the time. So that was when I was representing youth. And then my first open beach sprint world title was in the Netherlands in 2016, I think it was.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Fantastic.
Now.
Yeah.
It was pretty exciting. Yeah, it was interesting competition actually. They had a pile of sand kind of built up on the road. So we were almost on like a platform of sand, and that's where the race was run, because in the Netherlands, I guess the beach is quite firm. Like there's not much soft sand, so it'd be quite hard to sprint on barefoot.
Yeah,
so
okay.
they made this beach on the road, and it was interesting, but it was cool.
Okay, all right. Cool. And was there quite a large kind of global representation? Were there people from plenty of different countries? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a lot of countries that do surf life saving that kind of take people by surprise. I said, I've just been to Japan for the Seiko Grand Prix, and people are like, oh, have you been to Japan before? I was like, yeah, I've actually been here 4 times now. I've been there for 3 times for surf life saving competitions. And they were like, they do surf life saving in Japan? And I was like, yeah, like there's beaches in Japan. So yeah, there's a strong representation at a world level from, obviously the Netherlands, Japan, US, South Africa, GB.
Cool. We haven't got many beaches there. I bet that's miserable training for that in Britain.
Yeah, but the strongest countries are definitely Australia and New Zealand. Okay. They're kind of the ones usually fighting out for the overall point score. But there is definitely quite a fair bit of competition.
Okay. And kind of similar question to what I asked Matt, is it like, I feel like the training here might be a little bit different to what it would be for your amateur track sprinting. Are you able to kind of are there differences? And if so, you're able to outline kind of what some of them might be?
Yeah, well, similar to what Matt said, I mean, the training for me hasn't changed a whole lot. My squad is predominantly a beach sprinting squad, and a few of us do track and field, and we all do a lot of the same things. We train on the track, we train on the grass. And I mean, now I'm focusing on track. I don't go and do beach sessions when they're offered. But usually my squad towards, when they start competing, will do a few sessions on the beach just to get familiar with the sand. But most of our training is done on track. They still do block starts. They still do all of the stuff that I do, because running is running. But I'd say the big differences are just, the firmness of the track and the sand is like completely different. So it kind of requires a bit of a different running technique. And I'm still trying to work on that as we speak. I think I've just adapted so much to the sand that now there's things in my track career that it's just like, it's so frustrating. Like my block starts, for example, is just like learning how to, push out of blocks that are actually firm, not just built in the sand. Like if you build blocks in the sand, they're in the ground. So you've kind of got to like jump up and out. So I'm struggling to get kind of that low foot drive and just use the ground for force. Like it's just really different in that aspect. But yeah.
So do you find that this is me sticking my nose in where it doesn't belong? This is none of my business. But when I watch you run, one of the things that stands out is I feel like you're quite pointy with your toes. And is that something that comes from beach sprinting as well? Because obviously you're trying to sort of almost like dig and plant. And is that a fair comment? Or
dorsiflex. Dorsiflex is definitely something that I'm still working on. Jake Doran on the podcast recently, he always torments me about it. It's like dorsiflex. But yeah, definitely something that's come from beach sprinting. So as you can imagine, barefoot, soft sand, you've kind of got to point your toes and curl your toes and like dig in for traction. So that's something I'm working on. It's getting better, but you'll notice a lot when I slow down. In particular, I slow down on my toes, and Matt gives me a bit of crap about that one too. He's like, "You're gonna hurt yourself." But
I guess as well, like it gets compounded with the background in dancing as well. So dancing, I guess like everything is sort of like pointing your toes as well. Like I always, if ever I've been coaching, like don't want to say you can always do it, but it's quite obvious, I think, a lot of the time if you're coaching somebody that's either come from a gymnastics or a dancing background, because you see those pointy toes. So I feel like you've had sort of like that a double whammy there. Like you've had dancing and it's been reinforced with the beach sprinting. So it's probably quite difficult to undo as well.
Yeah, and there's those little things that don't help my track, but there's so many things that I think have helped my track. A lot of people comment on my high knee lift. I think I'm quite strong in my ankles because of the beach as well. So like all my ankle stiffness. So yeah, there's goods and bads, but
I just shot straight in there with the negative. I didn't mean it to come across quite like that.
No.
But like, absolutely. I mean, obviously, like, you know, with the dance, like the core strength, all that kind of stuff, just coordination, then, you know, that gives you a great platform. I think that, you know, to move into probably just about any sport that you want to move into. But kind of like you said, that like, you've got all these great positives, and then unfortunately as well, there's going to be a little bit of negative transfer from any sport into another sport as well. So you've already touched on some of the sports that you were involved in when you were growing up. Matt, what about you? What were you? Is it always?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So it wasn't always track for me. So I took up track when I was 12, but before that, I was playing a little bit of basketball through school, and actually started out in field hockey, which was really interesting. So I was a lover for that. My mum used to play back in the day, my sisters as well. So I started out in that, and there was one day at school that one of the teachers saw me running, and he's like, "Oh, like, do you do the waves?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't." Like, my mum doesn't let me play sport over summer, because I was overall like, "We're not playing sports over summer. Like, give yourself a break, family time." And he's like, "Oh, I really think you should." So, and before that, I was following all the Olympics before that. I always liked to run fast, and said to mum, I was like, "Oh, can I please do the lays? Please do the lays." It was like a couple of weeks straight, just asking her every day. And I think she finally just like hit the point where just like, "Yeah, okay, you can do it, but you got to promise me you can't miss one session." And from that day, from under 12s, I did not miss one session at all. I was ready to go, had my spikes in my hand, up early, ready for the lays, and never really looked back since.
Yeah, okay. I mean, so I did the lays. I mean, I'm going to say how old I am now. This was back in 92 to 93.
Yeah.
So I was doing it. And I just remember it was such like a great experience in terms of just getting exposed to the sport.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think like the ethos of it, like one of the things that stood out for me, I don't know if it's still the same, but when we did it with long jump, there wasn't a takeoff board. So they literally had a mat with some chalk on it. And then they
still do that.
From, right. So it's just wherever your foot takes off from, that's where they measure it from. There was no kind of, you couldn't fail kind of thing.
Exactly.
And I just think it's such a good way to kind of give positive exposure to kids. It's a great institution. Okay. And so were you kind of taking sprinting quite seriously quite young then?
Sorry.
Sorry. I wasn't too sure that it's directed at. But I'd probably say so. Like once I hit 12, like I think even in my whole career now, apart from injuries, I don't even think I've missed 10 sessions out of my whole career, because I'm always there. And I took it pretty serious when I was under 12s. I was lucky enough to become a state champion in the 200, which is funny enough because I'm a 100-meter specialist. And at that same state titles, unfortunately in the 100, I actually tore my psoas tendon in my hip.
Yeah, I remember.
So I had a couple of years out of the sport from them, and I was kind of finding my way and like coming back. Had surgery on that, and then I was lucky enough. I was working at Bunnings at the time, pushing trolleys, and there was a bloke that was there that was working. I was like, I know that bloke from somewhere, and I said, "Oh, are you Matt Carter?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah. Who are you?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, I run like I know who you are because I've seen you run at the track." He's like, "Oh, okay." And you know, him and I kicked off, and you know, we're just kicking off, and I was telling him I wanted to get back into running, and he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, like I've got a coach at this time." And I remember my coach now, which was at the time Bruce Gulliver, that I've gone back to, he absolutely grilled me on the phone, like called me, was asking me like 40 million questions, profiling me, everything. And I was like, oh, I don't know if he's going to let me train with him, but went down to the session one day when I was 14, came back, and yeah, I've been training ever since, pretty serious.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then likewise with you, Bree, so obviously you said you kind of did dance, netball, OzTag, all these other sports, obviously combined with doing your surf life saving as well. I know that you kind of transitioned to track sprinting relatively recently, but kind of at what point did you kind of start to focus on sort of sprinting, even though it was on the beach?
Yeah, so like I said, when I was 13, I won that Australian title. So I think that was a big turning point for me. And I mean, I stopped Little A's a little earlier down the track. And I think it's because Surf Life Saving and Little A's clashed a lot, especially the competitions on the weekends. And I think probably had more friends, and I loved being at the beach a lot more. So Surf Life Saving took that front spot, but and athletics took the back burner. But funny now, it's completely switched. And then when I met Matt in 2019, he was actually coming to the Gold Coast to do a race, and he was going to travel up to Brisbane and do one of the Shield meets at Cusack. And he's like, you should do it. And I was like, okay, like, why not? And he's like, it's like the same thing, you know, you train on the track and the grass. So like, what's the difference going to be? And I was like, okay. And at that point I had started university. I'd kind of fizzled out of surf lifesaving. I was kind of ready to put life first and, you know, get a job, move on with my life. I felt like I'd achieved everything that I wanted to in surf lifesaving. So I think there was a spark that I needed to kind of stay in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to Cusack, I ran 11:63, and it was kind of mixing it in with some of the best times that season. And one of my teammates was just like, oh, you could go to the Olympics. And I was like, what? Like, that's a joke. Like, that's just silly. And he's like, oh, I reckon you'll run 11:3 one day. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Still laughed at it. And then came home from Worlds last year with an 11:29. So that was a very full circle moment for me with only like under 3 years in the sport. So yeah, I guess, you know, that one race in 2019 was probably where I really, really switched on and took it to the next level.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love that. And at what point did you kind of like stop training for the other sports, or stop kind of participating in like the dancing and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so end of year 12, like I said, I went to Performing Arts High School. I decided to go to a full-time dance school in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for about a term of school and just decided it wasn't for me. Fell out of love with it. It was just so weird because like my entire life I was just like dance, dance, dance. My parents had put so much money into it, as you can imagine. Dance costumes are not cheap and training fees are not cheap. And then all of a sudden I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm going to go to the Gold Coast and pursue surf lifesaving. So that was in 2013.
Okay.
So I've been on the Gold Coast for about 11 years now, and it's just been running. So that's kind of where I left everything behind.
Right. Okay. And then, I mean, you mentioned about the World Championships last year in Eugene. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience? I mean, I'm sure it was a great experience. I mean, it's such like an iconic place to have the World Championships anyway. So kind of that being your first experience, I feel like that must have been a great experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was crazy to think that I'd qualified. I was like, how did I do that? I think I was the first female in like 2 decades or something to qualify for the event. So I was very honored to be there. And yeah, Oregon, obviously the home of track and field. Such a cool experience. We stayed at the Oregon University, and I know a couple of the other guys had been to a few World Championships before, and they were like, you're never going to experience one like this ever again, I don't think. They said it really gave that like Olympic Village kind of feel because we were all staying in the university. Okay. And usually if at a World Champs, apparently you usually stay at a random hotel that your country books for you, and it's very separate. So all the countries had like a shared cafeteria and whatnot. So it was a very cool experience sitting in the cafeteria with some of like the people I looked up into the sport. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And all the girls that I run with are like, Bree, like they're your competition now. I'm like, no, but it's still so cool. Like I want to learn so much from these people. And just like, you know, being at the warm-up track and Shelly Ann's just warming up next to me. I'm like, this is like wild, but whatever. But I absolutely loved it. It was such a cool experience. It's probably the first time that I'd raced in front of such a large crowd. Just kind of stood on the line for a few minutes before the race, just like taking it all in. I think that was so super important because once you race, it's like 11 seconds and you just shafted straight off the track. So it all happens very quickly, and it's kind of like the one moment you dream of for a while, and it's just done like in the click of the fingers. So yeah, it was a very, very cool experience, and I hope I get to do it again this year.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, I'm sure you will. But a busy year last year as well, because straight from there, then you were over to Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games in perhaps a less glamorous setting, I would say.
Well, it was a bigger audience, definitely much larger audience.
I saw they drew big crowds,
Yeah, no, it was still just as good. The jet lag was terrible, just flying the wrong way around the world. Took a while to get back into it. But yeah, the relay was probably the highlight of that trip. Got so close to getting a medal, but it was so much fun.
Okay, well, great 2022, and I'm sure kind of on to more exciting things in 2023 as well. So something I wanted to ask you both about. So you both work whilst you're training. Are you guys working part-time or full-time? I'll throw that to Matt first.
I'm working full-time, so I work 40 hours a week. So I work for a mining company because I'm based in New South Wales at the moment. Okay. So Bree and I are doing a bit of distance there, but they work in all like the mining section, so they do all the repairs on the mining trays and everything. So I'm just there. I give out gear, do some POs, purchase stuff. So yeah, I'm doing like 40 hours a week there, and then training on top of that as well.
Okay, and how do you find balancing that? And also, are you in the process of looking to join the fire department as well? Is that, am I right in saying
Yeah,
that?
so I'm looking at joining the Fiery. So I just got a congratulations email yesterday. So
I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
so I'm in the process of that. That's been like a 14-month drag out, and so
Right.
I'm still the waiting game. There's no guarantee I get the job,
Mm-hmm.
but hopefully, fingers crossed that I do I find out in the next month or so with that. But I find with working, like, it is hard. Like, I will admit, working 40 hours a week, and then you got to try and train 20 hours plus on top of that, and make sure everything's going right. It does get a bit difficult, but I think when I was young, I didn't really work too much. It was like 15 hours a week, and I think I was a little bit too consumed by athletics at that stage. And I think being able to work 40 hours a week, because I'm someone that stresses out a lot and thinks a lot, and I was so obsessed with it. I was just thinking about 24/7. And it was real funny when I started meeting Bree. Bree's like, oh, maybe you need something else to take your mind off it. And, you know, when I moved to New South Wales to pursue what I want to pursue, like my running, I was just like, oh, you know, I've got to work. And having that 40 hours a week kind of takes me mind off everything. I can get everything done in the morning, go to work, and then after that, it's just a full-time athlete mode. So it's good.
Yeah. Okay. And then similar question to you, Bree. Are you part-time or full-time at the moment?
Yeah, I'm part-time. So I do 25 hours at LSKD, and I do public relations and marketing. So yeah, absolutely love it. Obviously, they're one of my sponsors as well as an athlete. So they support me in all aspects, which I'm so lucky to have. So yeah, they understand. Like I remember when they first hired me in the role, I was actually an athlete of theirs before I was hired.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So I was hired in March last year, and I basically said to them, guys, best case scenario, might need to like jet off for 2 months, like last minute. And they were like, yeah, no worries. Like, we'll sort it out when it gets to it. And then like it happened. And my COO was just like, when you said like last minute, like need to go, like you really meant it. Cause literally I found out and was gone in 2 days. So yeah, they're super supportive of what I do. And just like Matt said, it's a good way to keep your mind off running.
Yeah.
I've always been like that. I'm very busy all the time, as Matt can probably vouch for. He tries to call me all the time. I'm like, busy, talk to you later. And sometimes I do probably overload myself a lot more than I should, but sometimes I think I thrive on being busy. You know, I take my work wherever I go. I'll take my work over to Europe when I leave and at the end of June for 3 months. So I'm lucky I can just take my laptop and still be able to do my job and keep my mind off running at the same time. But yeah, I think it's so important to have something else outside of running, because I think I'll go insane.
Yeah, I think it can be, I can imagine it can sort of like be quite sort of all consuming, and sort of having spent quite a lot of time around people that have been full-time athletes in the past, like I find that they do have very creative ways, I think, to keep themselves busy and to keep their mind off it. And I think like sort of in the infancy of social media, that was one of the things where it was sort of like some of them were just very, very involved in that. And I just wonder if it was kind of like a distraction to avoid just, particularly I think if you're intelligent, intellectual, critical thinker, then it's so easy to become overly analytical about and concern yourself with things that probably at the end of the day aren't really going to make that much of a difference to your performance anyway. But you know, you build them up in your mind, and it becomes, I mean, it seems bigger than it really is, and it becomes like you said, Matt, like all consuming.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I think it's also important to kind of prioritize your career after sport as well. You know, one day running's going to finish and you're going to be like, what am I doing now? You know, we're not in running forever, and we probably finish up quite young, to be honest. So I think it's important to prioritize that as well.
Yeah, it's not like some of the big sort of American sports or soccer in the UK or in Europe or whatever, where like you're set by the time you finished it. By the time you finished a sporting career, in that point you're set. I think it's a great idea to, like you say, have something kind of set up for that next chapter of your life.